May the peace of our crucified and risen Christ be with you.
And also with you.
Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome in friendship, welcome in faith, and welcome in God's all-inclusive and radical love. Today is the darkest day of our Christian calendar. It somehow seems fitting that it was pouring rain when I left this morning and was driving into the church. Having said that, I hope Sunday morning we have brilliant sunshine for our 8 o'clock service by the Brunel Locks. Today, we remember once again the darkness of Christ's death and the separation between God and humanity as portrayed in that death. We are not here to celebrate. We are here to remember. To stand at the foot of the cross, to face the truth of pain and suffering, of betrayal and brokenness. We come carrying the weight of the world in our hearts. We come with more questions than answers, with silence more than song. I hear this question at least once every Lenten season. What's so good about Good Friday? And this is a question that gets right to the heart of the Easter mystery. And if you've been asking this question yourself, you're not alone. Many people wonder how a day that commemorates suffering and death could ever be considered good. Well, the roots of the term Good Friday are actually quite old. And one of the theories about the origin of the name is this: good meant holy in older versions of the English language. Sometimes we refer to the Holy Bible as the good book. So in this sense, Good Friday is like Holy Friday. Does that make sense? That's all I got. So let us open ourselves to the deep feelings and the sadness of this day, whatever we choose to call it, as we walk to the foot of the cross together. Join me now in a call to walk in the shadows as printed inside your order of service. We gather today in the shadow of the cross, a symbol of sorrow, of injustice, of love poured out without limit. Jesus comes not in power, but in love.
We come with hearts both heavy and full, seeking truth, healing, and renewed courage in a broken world.
Today we remember that Jesus didn't turn away from suffering. He stood with the oppressed, spoke truth to power, and he loved without fear.
We remember that the path of love is not always easy, but it is the way of new life and resurrection.
So let us come, not to explain the mystery, but to stand in it together, humbled, awakened, and held.
We come in the shadow of the cross, knowing that even here we can feel God's presence.
Let us enter this holy sorrow with open hearts and allow our hearts to be transformed. As we enter this story again, draw us into the mystery of God's grace, and may God hold us close. Our opening hymn on our Good Friday service today, as we remain seated, Beneath the Cross of Jesus, number 135. Join me now in the opening prayer as printed inside your order of service and as will appear on your screens at home. Holy Mystery, on this solemn day, we come with reverence and awe. We do not rush ahead to Easter joy. We pause here at the foot of the cross. We pause to remember the cost of love, to honor the suffering of our world, and to confess our own need for grace. In an ancient world wounded by violence, we remember the one who was wounded for preaching a message of peace. In a world driven by power, we remember the one who chose humility. In a world afraid of truth, we remember the one who lived it, spoke it, embodied it, even unto death. Why does that ancient world hauntingly echo the world we find ourselves in today? May we leave this space more tender and more rooted in the hope that even in our darkest hour, you are at work. Amen. And now our choir will bring us our anthem called Who Is That Man? Thank you to the choir. That was beautiful. So now we're going to hear our story once again, and we've called it Facing Our Shadows. We're going to hear the story, and hopefully today we will be able to hear it with fresh ears. Let us remember the depth of Jesus' love and how he died, showing us all a better way to live. Now, I'd invite you to look at your order of service because I will not be announcing the hymns. So as our readers finish, you will see the hymn that will follow and the verses that we will sing. So be sure to follow along, and we will remain seated for this part of our service. And so we will begin with the shadow of betrayal.
I don't know how it happened, but things changed somehow. At first, he was strong, confident, outspoken. I had such high hopes. Finally, a leader to throw off the Romans. But just when the time was right, at the height of his popularity, he began to withdraw. He became quiet, almost introspective. I thought a bit of a push would help him to reach for greatness. You know, pass on a bit of information about his movements and make a bit on the side for me. And then watch him rise to victory when they came for him. Only it didn't work out like that. Jesus let them take him. "You will betray me, Judas," he said. I wonder how he knew. I thought I'd be discreet, but I didn't expect it to turn out the way it did.
The shadow of inner agony.
He was such a unique boy, my nephew. Cousin to my sons, James and John, but more of a friend to them, really, and to me. He was always caring, always serving, always putting other people first. I remember when I asked him if my boys could sit on the throne with him in his kingdom, one on his left and one on his right. "Salome," he said to me, "the great ones in God's kingdom are the ones who will serve. Even I have come to serve and to lay down my life." I felt rather humbled that day. It's incredible that in his time of agony, praying all alone, the ones he served so well couldn't serve him in return, not for one short hour. There they were, my sons and Peter, all asleep while Jesus cried and sweated blood. And none of the others were any better. Alone he prayed, Take this cup from me, but not my will, Father, yours be done."
Christian.
That was a dark night. We didn't expect those terrible things. Perhaps we should have foreseen it, prepared for it. Maybe then we would have reacted differently and stood with him through it all. But we didn't understand. So there we were, Peter, James, and me, fast asleep, oblivious to his pain, and suddenly he's waking us up. And there's Judas, and the lights, and the swords, and the soldiers. They were arresting Jesus. We were no match for them, and they would have taken us too. We were terrified, and so we ran away, all of us. And we left him to face their swords alone.
The shadow of denial.
What was I thinking? I expected so much more from myself. Oh, at the table at supper time, it was easy. When Jesus talked about being betrayed and arrested and dying, I was angry and protective. I'll fight for you, Lord, I said. I'll die for you. I thought he was just frightened and emotional when he replied, "No, Peter, before the cock crows 3 times, you will deny even knowing me." Deny him? I wouldn't have thought it was possible. But that was then. I know it's true. When it finally came down to it, I couldn't fight for him. I couldn't die for him. I couldn't even answer the question. Yes, I know him. I follow him. I believe in him. And as they led him away, he looked at me. Those eyes, I expected anger and judgment. But there was only love. In his eyes, there was only ever love.
The shadow of accusation.
People were curious about my devotion to Jesus, but it's easy to understand, really. I lived with accusations all my life. Adulterer, madwoman, evil, possessed. They said it all and more. And much of it was true. But Jesus, he didn't accuse. He didn't judge. He didn't make any demands or require anything. For the first time in my life, someone saw past the pain and the brokenness to my soul and gave me the freedom I longed to have. Of course I was devoted. Ironic that the one who accepted and included all without accusation should be forced to hear lies about himself, should stand alone and face all those pointed fingers and cries of, "Crucify him, crucify him." The one whose only crime was acceptance, sentenced to death on the force of false accusations by the ones he sought to love and heal.
The shadow of mockery.
Somehow, I've developed quite a reputation for doubt and questioning. A little unfairly, I think, but I do confess to being confused and uncertain, especially at the end. I mean, he healed the sick. He raised the dead. The whole nation was eating out of the palm of his hand. Then suddenly, they were shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" With all his power, he just stood there. And then when the soldiers mocked him, he took it all. They stripped his body, torn from the terrible flogging, and then pretended to worship him as king with a crown of hard Judean thorns. They hit him, spat on him. How was I to understand this? He could have snuffed them out in a heartbeat, but he didn't. He just let them mock and torture him. I just don't get it.
Should I have known that moment was going to come? There had been death threats since he was a baby. He had spoken about his death more than once. Maybe I should have seen it, but nothing can prepare a mother to lose their child. I don't know how I got through that day. My son sentenced to crucifixion, the slowest and most agonizing death. Executed with thieves. My son, who had done nothing wrong. And in the face of it all, he forgave them. He forgave all of us. Then he cried out, "It is finished." As I watched the last breath leave his body, it felt like it was me dying up there. Lord, have mercy.
And as Jeanette extinguishes the last candle, signifying the darkness that came upon the earth as Jesus spoke his last words. And let us not forget that even as he hung there, an innocent man, he says aloud, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." I wonder today, when do we continue to crucify people in our world? When do we allow others to stand alone? When do we walk away and leave others to face the darkness by themselves? I will invite you now to sing the hymn, "Stay With Us Through the Night." And when we are finished singing this hymn, I would like you to come forward as the Spirit moves you and place your nail at the foot of the cross. I want you, when you come forward, to think about the times when we have not been all the person that we needed to be, when we may have let Jesus down in the way that we showed up in the world and our everyday lives. So let us sing, and when we're finished the singing of the hymn, you are invited to come forward and place your nail at the foot of the cross. Good Friday is not a favorite service of many people during Holy Week. In fact, many people like to skip Good Friday altogether and get to the joy of Easter Sunday. We get right to the Easter lilies and the Alleluias. And of course, Easter morning is filled with flowers and trumpets and maybe even bonnets if you feel so inclined. Typically one of the most beautiful services of the year. I get that. I get why we want to skip Holy Week altogether and get to Easter Sunday. However, we need contrast in this life. We need our rainy days so that we can appreciate the sunshine. We need the cold days of winter so we can appreciate the warmer days of spring. My dad used to say to me, "Diane, it's always darkest before dawn." I'm sure many of you here this afternoon have come from the same schooling as I have. Today is indeed one of the darkest days in our Christian history. The cruel execution of an innocent man by the corrupt political and religious leaders of his time, nailed to a cross. If we never experience the darkness, if we never experience our Good Fridays, how can we appreciate the glory of Easter? A lit candle after the power goes out helps us to find our way in the dark. But a lit candle in a bright room, even though it may look lovely, is just not as important or meaningful. Jesus was that light that could not be extinguished. Crucifixion failed to liquidate and obliterate Jesus. It failed to erase him from our memory. It failed to silence his followers. There was something about that man that proved to be stronger than even death upon a cross. And so today we remember, once a year, our worship takes us to a meal in an upper room where a friend turns traitor, to a garden of hard-fought prayer and then arrest, to a kangaroo court and to execution. Once a year, we peer into the abyss and we remember those whose suffering is mirrored in the cross, those who continue to be crucified today, the oppressed, the unjustly accused, the deserted, and the hopeless. Once a year, we will leave this worship space in a ponderous silence. But in 3 days, we will return to the glorious, risen light, spirit, and joy of Easter morning. Yes, Dad, it is always darkest before dawn. Amen. We will leave this place now, recognizing the pain of the reality of death and the brokenness in our world. Yet we know how the story ends. And we know that death is not the end of the story, that love lives on. And we know that goodness is stronger than evil and that love is stronger than hate. We also know that light is stronger than darkness and life is stronger than death. As we remain seated, let us sing our last hymn, "We Shall Go Out with Hope of Resurrection."